We're pleased to welcome Scott Davis this morning as our next speaker. Scott is the Executive Director of the Indian Affairs Commission in North Dakota. He was appointed in 2009, and as Executive Director, he serves at a cabinet level between North Dakota's state and tribal governments to address issues regarding education systems, court systems, economic development, social service systems, gaming, oil and energy law enforcement, transportation, healthcare systems, veterans, and youth. Prior to that appointment, Scott served in a number of capacities at United Tribes Technical College in Bismarck. And Scott also worked for the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe on environmental quality issues and as a teacher and coach at the Pierre Indian Learning Center and Turtle Mountain Community High School. Scott holds an Associate of Arts degree from Haskell Indian Nations University, a bachelor's degree in business, and a master's in management degree from the University of Mary. And Scott is a graduate of the Bush Foundation Native Nations Rebuilders Program and Executive Education at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Scott is a member of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe and a descendant of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. Please help me welcome him today as he talks with us about his topic scheduled as Life Journeys of Knowing Who I Am and Respecting Others.
All right, let's do a little testing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Can everybody hear me? All right, great. Yeah, I was telling a few of my friends, I said, make sure you drink a big cup of coffee before I speak, so you stay, because people tend to fall asleep when I speak, so hopefully we'll be okay. First of all, it's really an honor this morning. Very humbled by being asked to give a few remarks, a few of my thoughts this morning, and sharing some of my experiences growing up as a very, very proud Native American here in North Dakota. And I'm not here to really, tell you or how to show you per se how to better do relationships in our state, but it's more or less going off of what I've experienced throughout my life. I've been very, very, fortunate through my parents and my upbringing to be living on and off the reservation throughout my life. So growing up as a Native American, my mother and father, my father's a lifelong educator, and I think that has always resonated, made a big impact on forming who I am. My mother is a lifelong public servant in the Indian Health Service, so healthcare was a big thing in our family. So healthcare, staying healthy, and education have always been the dinner subjects of our conversations in our home. My Lakota name is Oshkate Tawa on my father's side, my mother's side, which means his celebration. That name was handed down from my family, by my uncle, who was a veteran back in those days, but handed down to me now. So really, Oshkate Tawa means, like I said, his celebration, and it's one of those names that I'm very, very proud of, but it has a lot of meaning to it, and it's kind of the journey in my life of identity of who I am, and I'll get into that a little bit later. I did have a really cool PowerPoint I had with some pictures, but I think my file was a little too big, a little too fancy maybe, so hopefully some of the, it'll come up later, but I did have some pictures to go with this as well. But, again, growing up, I always really knew who I was, again, from my upbringing, from my parents, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, and the fact that they always expressed to be very proud of who you are. Always walk with your head up, your chin up, not with your head down, and being proud of who you are, which led to a lot of places we lived too throughout my lifetime. My father, again, in education, we lived in Pennsylvania, Montana. We did a lot of, my father had a lot of education jobs and going back to school at Penn State, getting his master's and doctorate degrees. So, and I remember living in Penn State quite a bit, and that was my really first experience of seeing other colors, if you will, other races out there too. So that was a time where I used to fight a lot in my younger, I was in elementary because I was called a lot of names back then because people didn't really know who I was. I was called a lot of different bad names, names of color and so forth too. So I'd always get very, very mad quickly about, I'm Native American, I'm Lakota, I'm Chippewa, and so I would immediately sometimes fight, and it wasn't a good thing. But that's kind of how I was when I was just a young guy. The other interesting thing growing up is I didn't realize this till my later years, was the intermarriage of my mother and father, which back then was frowned upon. And I think that's one of the similarities I'll talk about in some of our similarities that we have as North Dakota citizens when it comes to intermarriage. Back then, in the mid-'60s, my mother and father met through my I want to call him my uncle in Dickinson, Don Blevins. They ran track together. My dad went to college in Dickinson, and it was one of those weekends where Don Blevins invited my father down to Standing Rock, and that's where him and my mother met. So of course the love story goes, they start courting each other, etc., and they got married. Well, interesting enough, where that was really frowned upon on my father's side and mother's side, of how dare you marry a Chippewa man, how dare you marry a Lakota woman. It's not very good, and to this day I still have a few aunties and uncles that still don't like that, so to speak. So, but it is what it is, but it's a commonality that I found out that some of us North Dakota citizens have too when it comes to some of our heritage and even some of our religion. And I bring this up about intermarriage because after church one day, excuse me, I was talking with our pastor about it, about my mother and father, and he said, in our culture it was no different. He said, Catholics and Lutherans, right? Right? And to me, I thought, here I am, and I'm very, very guilty of this, and I'm really working on this. I have my color blinders on. All I see out there is Caucasian people, right? And sometimes you put on your blinders with me, and you think, all I see is a Native American man. They're all the same. Every one in this room are all the same. No, you're not. You have different religions, different beliefs. Some of you are, I'm just, again, maybe generalizing here, and I apologize for that, Scandinavian, German, Russian, French, Irish, the predominantly the heritage of our state. But every one of you, I'm sure, are very, very proud of who you are, where you came from, the towns you come from, the religion that you associate yourself with too. But that's how we are too as well. Whether we're Lakota from Standing Rock, or Anishinaabe, Ojibwa from Turtle Mountain, or the Mandan Hidatsa from up there. Very, very proud of who we are. And that's a good thing. I think that is a very, very important thing. But it is interesting where we get into the intermarriage, where again, and I'm glad you laughed about Catholics and Lutherans. That was a no-no, And again, that's a similarity in our culture too, where some of that still exists today, where, historically we were not friends. We were kind of warring tribes back in those days too. So, but identity for me has always been, growing up, I've always been very, know exactly who I was. But there are times in my life, even as recently, probably when I was working, I can recall probably the most challenging time I've experienced my own interpersonal struggle of who I am was it was an event out in Fargo, and it was probably about 8 years ago, and I was working for Dr. David Gipton, and we're in conversations with Coach Dale Brown. If any of you know who Dale Brown is, he's a North Dakota native. He's one of my mentors to this day. I love the man like a father. We've adopted him as our own family member. He even has given him a traditional name as well, a Native American name too. So, but we're out there talking with Coach about the college, trying to raise money and do certain things, scholarships for the folks, and had this nice long conversation with Dr. Gipp and Coach Brown, 2 hours. And so we're in this hotel, and during the same time in this hotel, there's this big, huge business contractors of North Dakota, one of those big organizations that are just, a lot of businessmen in the hotel. And then Governor Hoeven was there, and so And back then I was watching politics, in and out of it a little bit here and there, but as soon as we got done with our meeting, we opened the door, we looked down the hallway, and we could see Governor Hoeven down there in the one of the commons areas down there, and there was a lot of suits and ties down there, and a lot of business people down there, and if you know Coach Brown like I do, he looks down there and, oh, look, he said, there's John. He calls him John. I'm like, and that's the type of relationship that he and Dale Brown have, because they're both from Minot. But he said, let's go down there and talk with them. And so Dale starts walking down the hallway, and I don't see Governor Hoeven. I just see a lot of Caucasian people and with business suits. And I'm looking down there, and I'm like, first thing that pops in my head is like, I'm not going down there. No way. No way. And so Dale just like, let's go. And he looks back at me and finally gets mad at me. Well, what's wrong with you? If you know Coach like I know him, he just, let's go. And so all the way down this long hallway, it's like the Hall of Wizard of Oz, right? This long hallway. I'm walking. I don't want to be here. What can I do? Come up with an excuse. Got to use the bathroom. Something. Come up with something excuse to get out of this, right? Because I don't want to be there. And so Coach he has me, and we're walking down the way, and still these a lot of business guys are kind of surrounding the governor, and they're talking with him, and Coach, he just, excuse me, he just kind of like the Red Sea, right? It just kind of parts, and everybody's kind of, oh, hey, what's going on, and he rocks it up to John, interrupts everybody. Hey, John, hey, how you doing? Good to see you, blah, 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 and hey, I want to introduce this to some of my friends here. And so here I am behind him, and I come up in the circle. And so here I am, and I'm looking right at Governor Hoeven, but I don't see Governor Hoeven. All I see is these eyes around me. They're all looking at me, and they're all Caucasian. And I felt so uncomfortable in that moment, where I really felt like I didn't belong. I felt like they're looking at me. They don't like me. I don't know, but it's just uncomfortable. And so I struggled with that. So I just put on a little fake smile and shook his hand, and I wanted to get out of there so fast and just be out of there. And so on the way home from Bismarck to Fargo to Bismarck, it just bothered me. It really bothered me. And I was talking with my wife. My wife was with me, and my colleague was with me. And I said, man, why did I feel like that? And I struggled with that. Why did I feel like I didn't belong in there? Why is it? Is it me? Is it them? What is that? And I didn't understand that. And it wasn't until, and it took me a long time to understand that. And maybe for me, and I'm just talking about myself here, maybe it is a DNA thing. Maybe it's just something that, because my mother and father never taught me that you go anywhere you want to go. You belong in it. You're just even like everybody else. In fact, you're better than everybody else. You know how parents are. We were like that. Be proud of who you are. But for me, it just felt very uncomfortable, and I've struggled with that. And even today, there are times where I'm in a lot of meetings every day throughout the week, and I know that I'm going to be the only Native American walking into a boardroom, and I'm wearing my suit and tie just like everybody else, and maybe sometimes I'm a little bit darker and sometimes shinier. That's an Indian joke. Got that fry bread shine, than everybody else. And sometimes I got to stop myself and say a little prayer and just remind myself that I'm educated. It's almost like that. If you watch, I watch Saturday Night Live. That Stuart Smalley. Oh, I'm good enough. I'm strong enough. And gosh dang it, people like me. And I gotta make myself laugh. But I gotta reassure myself that hey, I am even Stephen. I do belong here. And so those are just things that I deal with, and I'm not so much sure if other cultures feel that way, but those are one things that I kind of struggle with from time to time, and that's on me, but I got to remind myself that no matter where I go, no matter where I speak, no matter what the people I engage, I am who I am, and I should be very, very proud of that. There are other things that I think living off the reservation gave me a lot of confidence, as a young man, living in Pennsylvania, going off to school in Kansas, working down in Phoenix, Kansas City, the cities. I was like one of your average young North Dakotan back in the day. We migrated out, right? We all moved to the cities We want to experience downtown. That was me. That was me. And I really relish on that. But as I get older, I really missed home. I missed North Dakota. I missed my tribal lands. I missed my homeland. I missed the country. I think that's a North Dakota tribal DNA thing that we have in our DNA, is that this is home. The back roads, the country, the sunsets, the river, the lakes, the prairie, the Badlands. That's home. That is home for us too. So I am definitely the same with you on that as well. But it gave me confidence, and experience other cultures. I worked I worked on a lot of crews that were Hispanic and African American, and they come from all over. Worked with all of them. Worked with every one of them. And so I always took the time to meet them, to talk to them about their culture, about what they ate and what they did and what they did for fun. And I even do that today with my colleagues in the state. And so, and as a state employee, we in fact, in my world, do a lot of traveling across our state. That's always a good thing, because I stop in the small towns and try to know. I think I'm getting pretty good at all the shortcuts nowadays to get to A to B. But my time with my colleague, we start talking about family, we start talking about growing up, we start talking about religion, we talk about politics and so forth. And I tell you, that is really an education in itself, to have these conversations. And I think we have to have more of these conversations from time to time too, like venues like this, because again, it is all about education, about the stereotypes that I have about you and that you may have about me. And that some of these times, some of these questions that we were afraid to ask. And I go through this probably at least once a week with somebody saying, Scott, I want to ask you a question, but I don't want to offend you, right? You're never going to offend me. And I'll tell you why you're never going to offend me when you ask me about a Native American question, is because I know who I am. I know exactly who I am. I'm very comfortable who I am. I'm very confident in who I am. So any question to me is not a dumb question. How come Indians do things this way, right? What's this thing about Indian time? And I had a nice picture up here about Indian time, right? Well, I'll tell you what, Indian time doesn't give you heartburn. Doesn't give you high blood pressure, Think about Indian time, and I had a lot of these things on my PowerPoint, but Indian time to me is like it's a huge culture thing. There's a time and place to do things in our culture, and it's not right at 9 o'clock, 9 a.m. like today. Everything starts right at 9, and I knew that's just the way the world is. Well, if you were to have the same event down in Stanrock or in any other tribe, there'd be Indian time. There'd be the fudge factor of 15 minutes, maybe a half hour. A lot of times in our ceremonies, in fact, about a month ago, I was at a ceremony. I asked our spiritual leader, "What time should I be done?" "Oh, what time is it?" I said, "What time is it going to start?" I said, "That's what I thought." "Yeah, about 6." So to me, that was roughly 7 o'clock. And we laugh about it, but it's a thing where it's a respect thing. Again, from what I see, when it comes to some of our ceremonies or our gatherings back home, it's a respect thing, because whenever people are coming, right, and you kind of see and you kind of feel the audience, right? You feel who's ever leading the event. Okay, it's time now. It's time to start, right? Everybody's here. Everybody's comfortable, and maybe we're an hour late, so to speak, a half hour late. That's Indian time, So again, those are things that we think about. Again, Indian time, humor is a huge thing in our culture. I tell you what, if you don't know how to tease or take teasing, you're in trouble, because we like to tease. We like to tease about our different cultures. Again, that us Lakotas are better than the Hadatsas, And I always talk about our deer hunting, because I love to deer hunt. I'm a hunter. So a lot of my friends from MHA tease me about my hunting skills. I said, I shoot my deer. I miss sometimes. I'm not the best shot in the world. I said, but if you really think about our diet now, when we used to go up there and raid you guys, for your corn and your, what do you call? really all he did was balance our diet. Because there were a lot of meat eaters, but we needed some roughage from time to time too. So we go back and forth about our hunting skills and so forth too. The other thing too, like I said, Lord knows I face my share of the prejudices and the discrimination and those things, but I've always seen that is a two-way street, and sometimes I even see it more indirectly when it comes to some of these issues that we see on TV, and you could turn on every channel every day, click on your iPads and your phones and so forth, and if you want to see discrimination, you'll find it. And I've always been so whenever these things like Ferguson, right? I mean, it's in our face every day, and we're still suffering from that. When those things happen, you know, I watch that closely for some time, and I'm always curious about who's leading what. You know, who's leading the protests? Who's leading the rioting? Who's leading the discussions of how to work together? I read the blogs from time to time, some of our Native American blogs. And here's my thing about all that is really about, I'm very, very careful about who I follow and who I somewhat personally endorse about the approach in tribal-state relations in general, human rights relations. Because to me, if you're preaching hate, if you're preaching violence, if you're preaching pointing the finger, I'm not going to follow you. And I use sometimes the example of Leith. That's kind of back home, right? In our backyard. Watch that very, very closely. You know, who's involved in what? What is the peace mechanisms in place for discussions of how to remedy this, right? And as much as we hate to say that in this room, some of those guys had rights. You know, you just can't kick them out. That is probably a good thing of our country, that we all have some rights, no matter how much we don't like it sometimes, right? But how do we respectfully ask them to leave without violence, without hurt, without, you know, getting in people's face? Because we have enough of that in our world. I mean, we can, like I said, we can turn on the channel anytime across our nation, across the world, and we see hate all the time. And I don't like that at all. So again, those are things that I really, I guess, encourage you, is to be careful of who you follow. And I tell my relatives this a lot about, and there are a good lot of activists, as you want to call them. There are a lot of good people, but there are a lot of people that are working behind the scenes to create peace, to create communications, to do it peacefully. And I'll give you an example of that. And I rarely do I do this, and it's about honor. It's respect and honor. And this is my eagle feather. And I rarely bring out my eagle feather. And the thing about my eagle feather is that it was given to me when I got my name, when I was about 17 or 18 years old, when I was deemed by our veteran, our spiritual leader, Iman. And I was given the name Oshkate Tawa, feather. And so from time to time, I will wear it. There's only been 2 times I've ever worn my feather in my hair, and it's when I was graduated from college and when I was married. Very, very special times. But I thought I would bring it out today because this is a special moment for me, and hopefully for you, about what this really means. And I see, you know, I'll give you an example of who has a right and how the feathers to be worn. And I see this in our public schools from time to time, where usually around this time, about April, May, graduation's coming around the corner, high school, college, and some of our educational institutions have policy that don't allow a graduate, Native American graduate, to adore an eagle feather in their hair or their cap and gown. And I've always been very, very opposed to that, you know, internally. So I've always been one to think about, okay, how do I respectfully change this policy? You know, where do I start? And I use an example here locally with our Bismarck Crowbrook schools. And when it was before Dr. Olsman's time, I think it was with Superintendent Salloway, and we were talking about the feather. Well, Scott, the policy is the policy. And so what I did was I thought, well, maybe, well, I asked the leadership there, I said, what does you and the principals know about the feather? I can give you a one-on-one, not so much me because I don't have that right, but I have our spiritual leader here, Russell Gillette, who has the right. He's a veteran. He has the right from his tribe to have eagle feathers, to give them, to honor them. He has that right. We all know that. I don't have that right. All I have is this feather. I don't have the right to give it or to honor somebody with it. I don't have that right. But Russell Gillette does. So I brought Russell in and I talked to him about that, and we sat down with the educational leaders about the feather. And that's all it was. We weren't telling the school administration, the school boards, that you need to change your policy now. Because I've seen that. I've had many calls to my office that, don't they know? Don't they know this is a violation of our religious freedoms? You can go on and on. We have federal protections. We can go on and on. Tim knows that. That now if I had a feather, now if you had a feather, you would get in trouble, right? Right? So those are special things that we have, but there's a time and place where you can use, your federal protections, your federal laws, and so forth. But my approach in this was I really need to educate educators, so to speak, about the feather, when it's supposed to be worn, when it's supposed to be given, and bringing our elder or veteran in to explain that in a very respectful way was our first step. So little years go by. Another approach I used was, okay, let's go to our flags. We as Native Americans, veterans, our flag, American flag, is in the highest honor. And I had some really cool picture that I wanted to share with you about that, and how my grandfather, who was on D-Day, who wrote me a message in his book about protect your flag, protect your country, be a good soldier. That's what his message was to me. And my grandfather, Herbert Buffalo Boy, was the most decorated soldier in North Dakota at one time, so I really hold that in high regard. But it relates to the flag and the eagle feather, and what I'm trying to say here is during graduation, if you haven't noticed, during our graduation, there's always an eagle staff on the stage with our North Dakota and American flag. And that was a compromise I came up with our public schools, is to that, yes, our American flag is the highest in honor, but we also have our universal flag, which is our eagle staff. And so now we post that as well during graduation speeches, so during graduation. Well, little by little, a lot of, and I really credit Dr. Olsman for counseling me on the approach and how to work with school boards and administration, was that, Scott, I understand how adamant you are about the eagle feather, but it's got to come from the students, it's got to come from the parents. I said, we can arrange that very, very easily. So long story short, it was about a month or two ago, got the letter and the email from Dr. Olsman. School board said they voted unanimously to allow the eagle feather to be worn. I didn't expect that at all. Whoa. That's the power this has. It really does. And the other thing was, Bismarck wasn't the first large school district in the state to do this. Grand Forks did the same thing in January, February. They went through the same process. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I watched that very, very closely. Because again, you had emotion behind this. You had, just this behind that. And I've always said, when it comes to this, you can't have anger when you're representing this. You can't have disrespect. You can't allow hate to be in the conversation of this. I respect this. It's like a crucifix to some of us, right? You just got to respect that. You got to have a special aura around that. So when you're talking about this, you have to hold this in respect. So today, and I'm so proud of this, Grand Forks and Bismarck schools, and it's just for our students, is that they are now allowed, public schools have changed their policy in allowing the eagle feather to be worn, and the plume for the females to be worn in their hair or their cap and gown. And I've told the leadership on this, you don't know how big this is in the country. Because every year I see court cases in other school districts, and a Native American wants to wear their feather and plume in the school district of Phoenix, and it goes to court and it turns ugly. I'm thinking we're not doing this right in respect for this feather and the plume. We're not doing it right. And so again, those are things that lessons learned, I think, from what I've learned over the years. I think for me, my family, my kids, I got a daughter who's 10 years old and a daughter who's 7. I got a little junior now who's 2 years old. And I'm a grandfather 6 days ago now. I'm very proud of that. And so I'm curious about what I'm going to be teaching my children, about race, about their first encounter with African American, their first encounter with someone of different color. And because they're going to ask me questions, and what am I going to say? And I'm always going to say this: you respect them, you love them, you treat them with respect, with honor. You treat them how you want to be treated too. So those are things that as a father, that is my job to do that, versus the hate and things like that too. So like I said, there's a lot of stuff I could talk about. Citizenship is another one. I had a nice picture of what a ceremony was called back in about 1917 down in Standing Rock, where then the agent, James McLaughlin, had this citizenship ceremony for our people, which was really called the Last Arrow. And it had the picture depicted one of our relatives shooting an arrow into the sky, and basically after that arrow landed, now U.S. Standing Rock people are U.S. citizens. And when I look at that picture, I thought, okay, here's this big ceremony. But I always look in the crowd and think of the thoughts of my relatives thinking, well, what does this mean? I don't understand what this means about this citizenship. I'm Lakota, I'm Dakota, I'm a Hunkpapa. Now I'm what? A U.S. citizen. What does that mean? I don't know. What does this all mean? Those are things that I think about when I think about that 1917 picture about the last arrow. And maybe some of it was the last arrow that we will fight no more. I don't know. There's a lot into that picture that I'll look at it from one time, then a week later or a year later I'll look at it again and I see something else. I even see a plow in the front there. So that last arrow, and there's a plow there, assimilated us into farmers and ranchers. That just didn't work out so well. But we are U.S. citizens. We're unique. I'm a North Dakota citizen. I'm very, very proud to be a North Dakota citizen. I'm very, very proud to be a tribal citizen. So really we're like 3 citizens in our nation here. But again, first and foremost, our American flag is in high regard. You'll see that. I think probably the most fascinating, most proud moment is when I go down to Cannonball, and even when the president came down there, and you see, I forgot how many flags were posted on our powwow arbor, American flags all the way around. And every one of those flags comes from a family member who either was in their service or died in service. That's their family flag. And you got to go see it coming this I think it's July. You'll see Flag Day. And I'm sure some of you who are non-natives can post your flag up there as well. So you got to go see that. And it just doesn't happen just because the president came down there. It happens every year, and it shows how much honor we have for our flag. I know I got to close up here and open up to some questions here, but again, I really want to thank you for an opportunity to share some thoughts and this with you and some of the policies that I've been through. But it always has to be a peaceful way. It always has to be a respectful way. It always has to have an education turn. And legislators that are here, it's like that. You hear that. It's every session I get from our tribal people. Geez, don't they know? No, they don't. They don't know because I flipped a coin on them about, don't they know who we are as Native American people? I said, no, they don't. And you can't fault them for that. Because how much do I know about Scandinavian people? How much do I know about German Russian people? How much do I know about the Irish people? Not very much. Not very much. And so the same holds true with you, with me as well. And we just need to have conversations. I remember having coffee with Clay Jacobson one time. I don't think if he's here or not, but I'm sure his ear is going to ring right now. But him and I have coffee, and I always make a point to have coffee with people like Tim Purdon and Clay Jacobson and just interesting people. I'm very interested in people. And he said, Scott, I don't think North Dakota is ready for these conversations yet. I said, well, you're probably true, Clay. I said, but we can still be saying these things 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, about we as North Dakotans are not ready to have these conversations. And I think we need to. As long as it's done in a respectful, educational way, I think it would bring down stereotypes about who we are. It'd allow me to get to know you more. And it'll allow us to ask these questions without the feeling of, now that I'm going to offend you, right? We need to get past that. We really do. And the last thing I probably want to just share is that, our state is changing. I always use the Kirkwood Mall as an example. We as North Dakotas know that, and Tim talked a little bit about that. We as North Dakotas pretty much know that you look at somebody, yeah, they're from here. And now you look and thinking, they're not from here. Right? Isn't that the same, Larry? We know. It's the same thing with us Native Americans. You can sit at the mall and you just sit there. For me, I sit there and wait for my wife, right? And so I'm looking around, I'm thinking, interesting. It's just not, I always use and I use this in a funny term, it's just not cowboys and Indians down there anymore. It's a lot of different people down there, And that's just the way it is. So how are we going to adjust to that, How are we going to respect that? How do we somehow understand that? Because that's where we're at right now. So again, those are things that I see. I'm not trying to here to tell you today about what to do, what not to do. It's just my world that I've been living with in my 46 years now of being on this earth. So I'll be open to any questions if you have to have. If not, I'll be around after and like to chat with you and so forth. And yes, sir.
I have a perspective which I want to check against yours, see if mine is accurate. I started working in Western North Dakota 50 years ago. And at that time, Native Americans were very invisible in Bismarck. You very seldom saw you. We also had, probably still do, but had a low respect for you. And the feeling was that you did not have a respect for yourself. Over 50 years, you've become much more visible. I think I've seen a shift in your respect for yourself, and I think we've developed some respect for you. Things have not come as far as they should have in 50 years, obviously. But you feel that my assessment that there has been a shift, and there is a shifting that's going on.
Very, very good question, and I appreciate your honesty. It makes me think of a quote that I was taught here this last summer, and it's about education and advancing our cause, so to speak. I use it very broadly. Education, if you're not willing to learn, if you're not willing to get educated, if you're not willing to go to school, so to speak, something or somebody's going to control you. And I live by that. And I'm not saying education in terms of your degree. We all have degrees in here and so forth. But if you're not willing to get an education on something, I'll use an example of my education of the legislative session, right? That's an education itself. It's like a process. It's a game, so to speak. And if I'm not willing to learn that process, it's going to control me. And I think it's the same thing that resonates with other people, is that if there's an issue or a question, it's an education process. And if you're not willing to ask that, or if you're not willing to open to answer that question, or if you're immediately offended, then how do we learn? It's going to control you. It's going to control you, and you're going to walk away with things. There was another quote in here too I had that it's about literacy, and I'll share this with you really quickly if I have it. And it's the illiterate in the 21st century will be not those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, or relearn. So you think about literacy in an academia sense. Well, I think there are times where we have to unlearn something or maybe relearn something too. So hopefully that answers your question, sir.
Okay, just take a comment, Neil. You talked about being uncomfortable walking into a room full of Caucasians. I've been in a situation where I felt uncomfortable walking into a room full of other ethnic groups. So.
That's a human thing. I really believe it. Any other questions?
So what,
Yes, ma'am.
She asked what the most important conversation or question that we need to ask is.
And I think it's really based upon, like I said, the uniqueness of you, and again, my blinders of Caucasian people. We need to take the blinders off, right? Really need to take them off. Because I can assume that your upbringing may be same or different from, the other Caucasian person, right? There's differences. I've come to realize that. I've come to understand that. I've come to really appreciate that. And why is that? Why couldn't Catholics and Lutherans get married? Why? That to you that's strong. That's no way. Why is that? It's the same thing with us. So having that discussion about, for starters, I think having that discussion leads to something else. It gets your mind going about what's up with Indian time? What's up with all the rabbit jokes with Turtle Mountain, right? You got those things. And I think we as Native Americans have to allow that to happen. We have to allow it to be open. We can't be offended all the time about those questions, because to me it's opportunity to educate you on that. Hopefully that answers the question. Yes, sir.
I think we all like to feel welcomed, and I just wanted to say to you, that's not easy for different races or people sometimes to do that, when sometimes they're not comfortable with themselves. But I want to say that one of the experiences I had was out at United Tribes at their celebrations that they have here. And I felt so invited into that environment when there was only a couple, 2 or 3 of us that were white. But once we were inquisitive and looking to visit and to ask questions, we were welcomed. And I found sometimes I think we all want to be welcomed, but don't necessarily know it's not as comfortable on someone else's ground as it is in ours. And I really respect and admire the comments that you've made here today, and I really honor you. You really are a special man. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. When you bring up the powwow, and I've used this a lot too, North Coast Fest. Did you know that's a Caucasian powwow? You're doing the same thing as we're doing. Good music, right? Fellowship, language, good food. Oh, you're not. That's, and I say that fun and jokingly, the humor. The North Coast Fest is, because when I ran. And here's another thing, aha moment, right? My coach at the time, when I ran college up in Minot State, my coach would always tell me this. He would say, "Okay, now guys, we run our 10 miles, through the city, whatever." And he said, "Be careful now. North Coast Fest is going on. There's a lot of Norwegians around here." I didn't get it, I didn't get that one. So I'm like, okay, go out running. But to him that was a joke, and obviously you guys get that, So, but yeah, the powwow thing, the culture thing. I mean, I love North Coast Fest, and it's no different than should we go up to North Coast Fest? I don't know. You go. I'm not going up there, you know? But it's the same thing. So we need to feel comfortable in those environments too, so.
Scott, we have a question over here.
Hi, Scott. Thank you so much for being, I'm still emotional from your, for being the voice in Indian country for a lot of people. I appreciate it. And I guess the point that a lot of people have made, you included, is that if you're not open to that moment when we get to that, where somebody says, oh, me too, you know, then you never get to the bigger conversation. And I think that's what you were saying, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'd just like to echo the other comment about powwows and such. For one thing, we've attended a number here as well as in other places, and always felt the welcoming presence of the people that were hosting and all of the people who were gathered there and so on and so forth. I have a curious question that we've talked about a lot, and you see this at powwows and other events as well, and you touched on it here, and that is the kind of respect for, but also seems to be the kind of embracing of not only the U.S. flag, but military service and such among Native populations. And we've lived in, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, and Montana, so we've seen other Native populations as well. It seems to be universally true of what we've seen, that there's a very, very large embracement of the flag and military service, and it seems in some sense incongruous with your history. And I wonder if you could speak to that. But we've always been curious about that.
That's a very good question. You know, it reminds me of the citizenship picture for Standing Rock. You know, now that we're used as citizens, you know, it's for us. I think it's really about our country, broad picture. As a veteran, I'm not a veteran. It is my biggest regret of not being a veteran. I know my sister Janet just walked in too. She's a veteran. A lot of you are veterans in here. It's just it's probably a land thing. It's a people thing. But when we talk about the protection and the freedoms that we have, I tell you what, our people are so strong. Maybe even a little bit stronger than the common America when it comes to honoring our veterans, you know, and putting them first on everything. You know, they're first in line. They're first at everything. I've known. You have your tribal councils, your tribal chairpersons. They have a lot of say in our community, in our tribe. But we all know that veterans have probably a little bit more power, a little bit more respect when it comes to things on our reservation, and also elders as well. Our American flag, it's just like I said, and maybe it's more of a veteran, maybe more of a question for a veteran. I know Janet is here; she could probably answer that more directly because I'm not a veteran. But being I guess in our country, and gosh, you know, our country, we're very, very fortunate, what we have. You know, you could turn on the channel and the inner fighting. I was watching a documentary the other day about, you know, a country in South Africa where, you know, you have the same color fighting each other. I'm like, why is that? There's two of the same colors. They're black and they're fighting each other. Why is that? That just bugs me. But again, I think the flag, again, as you'll see, it's always going to be the most revered symbol on our reservation. I'm not sure how else to answer that. Yes, sir.
Yes. My wife and I are recent residents of North Dakota. We live part of the year in central New York, which is the heart of the Iroquois nation. In fact, I'd say half of the place names where we live are Indian words, and yet there are almost no Iroquois left. They were basically reduced to a few hundred and have never really bounced back from that due to all the cultural factors. And coming to North Dakota, we notice that there are actually a lot more Native Americans here, and they're all, you see them all over the place. My question is, clearly, some of them live on the reservation, some of them don't. In your job, how do you see the difference in of priority for different issues for the reservation Native Americans and the non-reservation ones? Are they different problems, or are they all the same problem?
Well, I think they're different and the same. I lived on and off the reservation my whole life. I worked there, was educated there. When I chose to move to Bismarck, it was primarily because of jobs, right? As we all know, it's preaching the choir here about the economics and poverty on our reservation exist. That's an old topic in itself, but I think for the most part, it is opportunity. My wife and I started a nonprofit here in Bismarck, Manitoba, called the Native American Development Center. So it's a place to go to when our relatives move here to find opportunity. And we work very closely with the mayor's office. We work with the housing offices. We work for healthcare facilities, Ruth Myers. We're having these relationship buildings. So when a person wants to come here, there's a place to go. Because I'll use an example, my brother who lives out in Helena. Helena's, that's Indian country as well. I mean, Bismarck, the Great Plains is what we call Indian country. Well, when he came here for a visit, he said, gosh, Scott, man, he said, it's really good to see Indians around. Everywhere I look, there's Indians. I'm like, really, you don't have that up in Helena? Not really. I'll see one maybe once a month. I thought, to him, that was important. He missed that. And I just kind of take it for granted because I can go anywhere and I'll see one of my relatives. I'm not saying blood relatives. I just call my relatives. And that you're home away from home, But what we're trying to do is create the center, a place to go for opportunity, to give you a hand up, and to get you started, but also a place to mentor, because we have so many outstanding professional business, professional people, Native Americans that live in this community. Carol, Janet, there's a lot of us that have a lot. We do our jobs during the 8 to 5, but there's a lot more where we can access their knowledge, using them as a mentor to do certain things in education, veterans, politics, whatever it may be. So we're trying to bring that together so our people feel comfortable here. And I think one start we did that with the city was, and with the mayor's help and our Bismarck Park Board, was to create the first ever, well, I'll say the first, it's been a few decades, a powwow down at the rec center downtown. It's a one-day Valentine's sweetheart powwow, as you call it. It's just to bring our people downtown. This is your city, your place. You live here, your place. Have fun, enjoy it, feel comfortable here. So those are things we're working on. And I don't know if that's answered your questions, but yeah, there's a lot of issues back home, and a lot of us that live up here, we call us urban Indians. There's 4,000 of us that live here in the Bismarck-Mandan. We do our best to help what we can do from the outside in, so to speak. So,
Scott, thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you for this heartfelt presentation. We appreciate you being here.